Welcome. You've arrived at another journey into the slow, steady rhythms of history. Tonight, we will wander along the banks of the Nile River into the world of ancient Egypt. This is a land of both splendor and struggle, a place where ordinary farmers toiled beneath the desert sun, where pharaohs raised monuments of stone that still tower after thousands of years, and where mysteries still linger, waiting quietly in the sand. As always, this journey is not one of speed or excitement. It is meant to unfold gently, like the slow current of the Nile itself. You are invited to listen, to let your imagination wander, or perhaps to let your eyelids grow heavier, drifting in and out of the words. There is no rush here. History will flow at its own calm pace. We will travel through 4 stages tonight. We will begin by stepping into the sandals of a farmer along the Nile, to feel what daily life was really like for the many, not the few. Then, we will move into the story of a remarkable ruler, a woman who defied tradition to become pharaoh. Next, we will turn to mystery, the secrets hidden within tombs, and the allure of King Tutankhamun's burial chamber. Finally, we will lift our eyes toward the golden halls of the pharaohs themselves to glimpse a life of ritual, wealth, and divine authority. For now, find a comfortable place. Let the noise of your day soften into the background. And together, let us step back thousands of years into a world where the Nile gave life and demanded much in return. Imagine yourself waking in the gray stillness before dawn. You lie on a mat woven of reeds in a modest mud brick house by the riverbank. The night has been short and restless, filled with the hum of insects, and the air is heavy with warmth even before the sun rises. This is Egypt during the Middle Kingdom, or perhaps the New. But for the farmer, the rhythms of life have remained largely the same across centuries. You rise not by choice, but because the day's labor demands it. Outside, the village is stirring too. Chickens cluck softly in the yards. The faint smell of smoke curls up from cooking fires where flatbread is being prepared. Your life, like that of nearly every farmer, is bound to the Nile. The great river is both a blessing and a burden. When its waters flood, they spread fertile silt across the fields, a gift that makes grain grow in the desert. But when the floods are too weak, famine threatens. When they are too strong, homes and fields are washed away. Either way, you endure what comes. Today, your task is simple but endless. With a wooden hoe, heavy and worn, you will scratch furrows into the damp soil left behind by the receding flood. There is no iron, no steel-only tools of wood, stone, and sometimes copper. The work is slow, back-breaking, and repetitive. The sun climbs higher, and the heat presses down. Sweat beads on your skin, dust clings to it, and insects gather. Beside you, others labor as well. Whole families join the work, for every hand is needed. You hear the voices of neighbors speaking in the old Egyptian tongue, perhaps chanting softly to keep rhythm as they bend and rise. Children may help by carrying water jars from the Nile, though they will spill half of it before reaching the field. Taxes weigh heavily on your mind. The grain you sow and later harvest is not yours to keep. Much of it is claimed by the temples or by the officials who serve the pharaoh. Will store it in large clay jars, but most will be carried away to feed the elite, the priests, and the armies. What remains will sustain your family barely. Disease is a quiet companion. Malaria hums and the mosquitoes bite. The Nile carries parasites invisible to the eye. Many live with fevers, aches, or weakness, but the work goes on. There is no medicine beyond herbs, prayers, and charms. At midday, the sun is nearly unbearable. You pause, crouching in the shade of a palm tree if you can find one, tearing off a piece of coarse bread from a small cloth bundle. Perhaps there are a few onions, or dried fish salted for preservation. The bread is filling but rough, baked with grains of sand that grind down your teeth over years. Water is drawn from the river, muddy and not always safe, yet it is all you have. The afternoon is no gentler. The hours stretch, and each movement is heavy with fatigue. Yet this is your rhythm, as it was your father's and his father's before him. Plant, water, harvest, and surrender the yield to the scribes who arrive with reed pens to measure it. And when the harvest is poor, punishment follows. A farmer who fails to meet the quota may be whipped by overseers, or worse, pressed into forced labor on state projects. You may be taken to haul stones for a temple or pyramid, far from your family. There, too, you will toil endlessly, the sun above, the dust below, the lash at your back. As night finally falls, you return to your home. The day has left your muscles aching, your body coated with grit. The small lamp of oil burns faintly in the corner of the room, casting shadows on the walls of mud brick. The meal is plain. You eat, you rest, you sleep on the same reed mat, knowing tomorrow will bring the same routine. And so it goes. The rhythm of your life, the Nile rises, the Nile falls. You rise and you labor. You know little of pharaohs or politics. You know only the soil, the sun, and the endless demands of survival. For you there is no glory, no golden tomb, only the simple struggle of existence. To live as an Egyptian farmer is to live at the mercy of nature, of rulers, and of time itself. And so when we ask why you would not last a single day in this world, the answer lies in its constancy, its harshness, and the weight of demands placed upon you. Yet for those who endured it, this was life, a rhythm as steady as the Nile itself. Let us leave the fields now, step away from the sweat of the farmer's toil, and walk slowly up toward the gleaming stone temples, where incense drifts into the air and carved walls shimmer with painted hieroglyphs. Here the world is entirely different. It is the world of royalty, of priests, and of power. Our story tonight is that of a woman, one who became pharaoh in a world where nearly every ruler was a man. Her name was Hatshepsut. Imagine yourself in Thebes around the year 1479 BCE. The temples are busy with offerings to Ammon, the great god, and the halls of the palace echo with the footsteps of officials. At the center of this world stands Hatshepsut, daughter of a pharaoh, wife of a pharaoh, and eventually ruler in her own right. Her beginning was typical for royalty. She was born into privilege as the daughter of Thutmose I from an early age. She would have learned the sacred rituals, the responsibilities of nobility, and the symbols of divine kingship. As was custom, she was married to her half-brother, Thutmose II, to secure dynastic power. For a time, she lived as queen consort, performing ceremonies, overseeing palace affairs, and bearing the role expected of her. But destiny shifted. Thutmose II died young, leaving behind a very young heir, Thutmose III, who was still a child. Egypt, always wary of instability, needed a strong hand to guide the throne. Hatshepsut stepped into that role at first, as regent, ruling on behalf of the boy. But over time, her position grew bolder, until she no longer acted as guardian, but as pharaoh herself. To take such a step was extraordinary. Pharaoh was not simply a king, it was a living god on earth. A woman to claim this mantle required not just ambition, but extraordinary strategy. Hatshepsut presented herself as chosen by Amen, blessed and destined to rule. She had herself depicted in statues and reliefs, wearing the false beard of kingship and dressed in the kilt of a male ruler. Yet her features often remained unmistakably feminine. She straddled two identities, using tradition while reshaping it. Her reign was one of prosperity and building. Instead of leading Egypt into endless wars, she focused on trade, diplomacy, and monumental construction. Under her command, fleets sailed to Punt, a mysterious land possibly along the Red Sea or Horn of Africa. They returned with incense trees, exotic animals, gold, and treasures that enriched Egypt's temples. Reliefs of this expedition can still be seen carved into the walls of her grand temple at Deir el-Bahri, showing ships laden with goods and rows of strange plants and people. Her temple itself is a marvel. Rising in tiers against the cliffs of western Thebes, it blends with the landscape in a harmony of stone and desert. Broad ramps lead upward, flanked by colonnades of tall columns. Here, priests performed rituals to honor her and the gods, ensuring her memory would endure for eternity. Hatshepsut's reign lasted more than 2 decades. It was marked by stability, wealth, and artistic achievement. She proved that a woman could rule Egypt not merely as regent but as pharaoh in her own right. Yet after her death, her legacy was threatened. Thutmose III, the child she had once protected, grew into power and later attempted to erase her memory. Statues of her were defaced, names chiseled away from temple walls. To the Egyptians, erasing a name was a second death, the most devastating punishment. Why this was done remains debated. Perhaps it was revenge. Perhaps an attempt to restore tradition. Or perhaps simply a political move to strengthen the lineage of male rulers. For centuries, Hatshepsut's story was hidden. Her temple still stood, but her identity was clouded. It was not until modern archaeology rediscovered her name that she regained her place in history. Today, we see her not only as one of Egypt's few female pharaohs, but as one of its most capable rulers. And so, as you picture her temple bathed in sunlight, the ramps climbing toward the cliffs, you can imagine the quiet strength of a woman who defied the expectations of her world. She rose from queen to pharaoh, guided Egypt with steady hands, and left behind monuments that endure across millennia. Hatshepsut's life reminds us that history is not always as simple as kings and dynasties. Sometimes in the cracks of tradition, remarkable figures emerge, bending the rhythm of their world if only for a time. From the grand temple of Hatshepsut, let us walk deeper into the Valley of the Kings. Here the desert is silent, broken only by the whisper of the wind against stone cliffs. Beneath the surface lie corridors and chambers carved into the rock, places meant to guard rulers for eternity. Among them, one tomb above all others has captured the world's imagination, the resting place of a boy king. Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was not a mighty pharaoh by Egyptian standards. He reigned for less than a decade, from around 1332 to 1323 BCE, and died at only 19. His rule followed the upheaval of his father, Akhenaten, who had tried to transform Egypt's religion by elevating the Aten, the sun disk, above all other gods. Tutankhamun restored the old ways, returned power to Amun in the traditional pantheon, and lived a short, quiet reign. But his fame does not come from what he accomplished in life. It comes from what was left behind in death. Imagine the year 1922. The Valley of the Kings had been searched for decades by archaeologists, many convinced that nothing new remained. Yet Howard Carter, a determined British excavator, refused to give up. After years of digging, his workers uncovered a set of steps descending into the earth. With each careful movement, dust and rubble were cleared until a doorway appeared sealed with ancient plaster, marked with royal insignia. When Carter peered inside with a candle, he saw something extraordinary. Furniture, chariots, statues, golden shrines, and treasures filled the small antechamber. It was as though time itself had stopped, preserving this snapshot of royal life. And beyond it, another sealed doorway led to the burial chamber. Inside lay Tutankhamun's sarcophagus, and within it, the famous golden mask. The face of the boy king, serene and eternal, gazing outward through gold and inlaid stone. The discovery was unparalleled. Most royal tombs in the valley had been looted in antiquity, stripped bare by grave robbers. But Tutankhamun's tomb was almost intact, its wealth astonishing. Beds shaped like animals, delicate jewelry, chests filled with clothing, weapons, and musical instruments, all items meant to serve him in the afterlife. The tomb was small compared to others, leading many to wonder if his death had been unexpected, and if he was placed in a hastily prepared chamber. His early passing remains a subject of debate. Some believe it was illness, others an accident, or perhaps complications from congenital conditions. The truth is uncertain, and perhaps always will be. And then, of course, there is the legend of the curse. Newspapers at the time whispered of strange deaths among those who entered the tomb: illness, accidents, sudden misfortune. In truth, most of these stories were exaggerations woven to sell papers and stir public fascination. Yet the idea of a curse lingered, casting a shadow of mystery that endures to this day. Archaeologists, however, focus on what the tomb reveals about Egyptian life and death. The objects speak of a culture deeply invested in the afterlife, where every tool, ornament, and comfort of the living world was prepared to follow the king into eternity. Each item was symbolic, designed to ensure that Tutankhamun would not just survive death, but thrive in the realm beyond. Close your eyes and imagine walking into that chamber. The air heavy with the scent of dust, undisturbed for more than 3,000 years. Gold gleams faintly in the dim light. The silence is absolute. You are standing not just in a tomb, but in a doorway between worlds, the world of the living and the carefully constructed eternity of the dead. Today, Tutankhamun's treasures are displayed in museums, admired by millions. His golden mask has become an icon, instantly recognizable across the world. Yet the boy himself remains an enigma. Short life, small tomb, is an outsized legacy created by chance. the chance that his resting place escaped the hands of looters and waited patiently beneath the sands until the modern age. And so, Tutankhamun's name, once nearly forgotten, is now among the most famous in history. Proof, perhaps, that even in death, some stories find a way to endure. We have walked with farmers in their fields. We have stood at the side of a queen who ruled as pharaoh. We have peered into the sealed silence of a boy king's tomb. Now, let us turn our gaze to the living palaces of Egypt's rulers, places where wealth and ritual defined daily life, and where the pharaoh was not just a king, but a god walking among mortals. The pharaoh's palace was unlike the small mud brick houses of the farmers, built of stone and plaster, decorated with columns painted in bright colors. These structures were both practical and symbolic. They were centers of government, of ceremony, and of power. Imagine stepping through a tall gateway into a broad courtyard. The floors are polished smooth, the walls adorned with scenes of conquest, offerings, and gods watching over the ruler. The scent of incense lingers in the air. Servants move quietly, carrying trays of food, jars of beer, and jugs of cool water. Musicians may sit in a corner, plucking at harps or playing soft flutes to fill the hall with gentle sound. Here the pharaoh lives surrounded by attendants. There are scribes who record every decree, guards who ensure his safety, and priests who guide the rituals of divine kingship. Even within his own home, the pharaoh is rarely alone. Every moment is observed, every action carries weight. Meals are far richer than the bread and onions of the farmer. Imagine platters of roasted duck, cuts of beef, fish fresh from the Nile, bowls of figs and dates, and loaves of bread baked fine and white, free of the grit that wore down common teeth. Wine from the delta flows into golden cups, sweetened with honey and flavored with herbs. The pharaoh's clothing is also finer linen, bleached to shining white, woven so thin it is almost transparent in the sun. Gold ornaments, wide collars of inlaid stone, bracelets, and rings gleam against his skin. On his head rests the Nenes headdress, or the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, symbols that mark him as divine. But life in the palace is not all feasting and display. It is a constant rhythm of ritual. Each day begins with offerings to the gods, sometimes performed directly by the pharaoh himself, sometimes by priests in his name. He is the mediator between heaven and earth, the living embodiment of Mat, the balance of order and justice. Every decree, every gesture, carries this sacred responsibility. Beyond the palace walls, workers quarry stone, farmers bend over the fields, soldiers guard the borders. Within the palace, these labors are transformed into symbols. The pharaoh is seen presenting conquered lands to the gods, his power eternal, his reign blessed. In reality, he depends on armies, scribes, and officials. But in the imagery of the palace, all flows from him and through him from the gods. Evenings may bring entertainment. Dancers with painted eyes move to the rhythm of drums. Musicians play in groups. And storytellers recite tales of the gods Osiris and Isis. Horus and Seth, the palace, for all its solemn ritual, is also a place of enjoyment and leisure, a pleasure carefully controlled. And yet, for all the wealth, the pharaoh is not entirely free. He is bound by tradition, by ceremony, by the need to appear divine. A farmer might toil endlessly, but he at least knows rest when the sun goes down. The pharaoh, however, is always on display. He is never simply a man. He is a god-king, burdened with the weight of eternity. When you close your eyes, you may picture the two worlds together. On one side, the farmer eating coarse bread in a mud brick home. On the other, the pharaoh reclining in a hall of painted columns, a golden goblet in hand. Two lives, both shaped by the Nile, both part of the same civilization, but separated by an unbridgeable distance. This contrasts the toil of the many and the splendor of the few is at the heart of Egypt's story. Civilization built on balance, of river and desert, of life and death, of ordinary people and extraordinary rulers. And so, our journey through Egypt draws to a close. We have felt the heavy sun on the backs of farmers. We have stood before the quiet strength of Hatshepsut. We have stepped softly into Tutankhamun's tomb. And we have walked the polished halls of Pharaoh's palace. The world of ancient Egypt was one of contrasts, hardship and luxury, tradition and change, life and death. Yet through it all, there was rhythm. The steady rise and fall of the Nile, a cycle of planting and harvest. The passage from life into eternity. As you rest now, you might let that rhythm carry you. Imagine the river flowing quietly under the stars. Imagine the sand stretching endlessly into silence. Imagine the monuments standing tall, their shadows cast by the moon. The farmers, the queens, the kings, and the children of Egypt are long gone. Their struggles are finished, their temples weathered, yet their memory endures, preserved in stone, in story, and in the slow, unhurried telling of history. May the rhythm bring you peace tonight as you drift gently into sleep.